Hey everybody, it's me. I hope you're all having a great day so far. I just wanted to go over something with you very quickly today. One is an expression, one is an idiom. They're very, very commonly used by native speakers. I hear them being used all the time. They have similar meanings. They're used in similar ways, in similar contexts, but there is quite a noticeable difference between the two, which is why I wanted to go over this with you. Anyway, so let's get right into it. The first one of which I want to talk about today is to do something at the expense or cost of someone else or others. Let's say someone else or others. Okay, so again, let me just go over this several times. To do something at the expense of others. I'm sure many of you have heard this before and you know exactly what it means, but for those of you who don't know very well. So to do something at the expense of others. To do something at the cost of others. To do something at the expense, at the cost of others. Just by the words and the way it's phrased, I'm sure you can kind of already guess what it means and how it's used. But so I just wanted to go over this with you because it's a very commonly used expression. So when someone does something at the expense or at the cost of someone else, that means the person is gaining something, is benefiting some way or somehow. But in order for that to happen, someone else has to sacrifice something. Someone else has to lose something. Okay? So if A does something at the expense of B, that means in order for A to gain some kind of profit or benefit something, that means B has to lose something. B loses something in order for A to gain that. That's basically what it means. And this is the kind of expression that we wish we never had to use, but because of the way the world is, we just have to use this expression quite often, unfortunately. So again, I don't know if there's a similar expression in Korean. Is there? Maybe you can let me know in the comment section below. Please let me know. I've been thinking about this all morning, and I just couldn't come up with a matching expression in Korean. Maybe there isn't one. Maybe there is one. I don't really know. But you can kind of already guess what it means, right? So doing something at the expense of others. And I tried coming up with some examples with this, and I did actually come up with my own examples, but I thought, hey, we have artificial intelligence nowadays. Why go through the trouble of coming up with these kind of examples ourselves? So I asked ChatGPT to come up with some examples, some hypothetical examples, not real life examples. But this is, I think we can, just by looking at these hypothetical examples, it could give us a real good idea of the things that we can expect. So I asked ChatGPT if it could give me some examples of some hypothetical examples of someone doing something at the expense of others. And here's the first one. Let me read it. A landlord raises the rent on their tenants even though they know that many of their tenants are struggling financially and may not be able to afford it. This benefits the landlord financially, but it comes at the expense of their tenants who may have to choose between paying rent and paying for basic necessities like food and healthcare. So, yeah, this is a very typical example of someone doing something at the expense of others. So, number 2, an employer hires employees as independent contractors rather than as full-time employees in order to avoid paying for benefits such as health insurance and retirement plans. This benefits the employer financially, but it comes at the expense of the employees who are not entitled to the same benefits as full-time employees. So this is another very typical example of someone doing something at the expense of others. So an employer benefiting at the expense of its employees, right? So a third example that ChatGPT gave me is a company dumps toxic waste into a nearby river. Knowing that it will harm the environment and the health of people living in the area, this benefits the company financially by allowing them to avoid the cost of proper waste disposal, but it comes at the expense of the people and wildlife that depends on the river for survival, right? So this is an example of a very, I don't know if there were any cases like this in real life, but I'm sure there were at least one or two. But it's just an example of a company, a very selfish company, I guess, that is gaining at the expense of others. In this case, a large group of people and wildlife. So this is probably like the worst case among all three. But I guess that's debatable. People may say differently. But anyway, so this is what it means to do something at the expense of others. Now, there's an idiom that's very similar to this in terms of meaning and how it's used. But because it's an idiom, it may be a little more visualized in terms of how it's phrased, okay? So similar, not exactly the same. Like I said, there's a difference in terms of how what it means. But to throw someone under the bus. Have you heard of this one? To throw someone under the bus? So to throw someone under the bus means to deliberately put someone in harm's way, to deliberately cause someone damage. But usually not physical. Usually this is referring to a reputational damage or something that will eventually hurt the person's career and reputation, okay? And this is where it's a little different. Not to gain profit or benefit, but to avoid being blamed for something, to avoid being held responsible for something, to avoid being punished for something. And to avoid that, they use someone. They sacrifice someone and they hurt their reputation or career instead. So it's like, oh no, I might get in trouble for this. But if I sacrifice him, everyone will blame him instead of me, and I won't be held responsible for it. I won't get punished for that. So I will just sacrifice that person. And if I actually do that, then I'm throwing that person under the bus. And so the damage goes to that person instead of me. So there's betrayal and there's diversion, there's deceit. All these are involved in throwing someone under the bus. So again, it's one of those things that we really wish we didn't have to say, but like I said, because of the way the world is, it's something that we unfortunately have to say quite often. And once again, I asked ChatGPT to give me some examples of some hypothetical examples of throwing someone under the bus. And so this is what ChatGPT gave me. A company executive blames a junior employee for a mistake that they themselves made in order to avoid getting in trouble with the company's board of directors, using someone to avoid being blamed themselves, to avoid being held responsible, to avoid being punished, and you sacrifice, in this case, the company sacrifices a junior employee. And so in this case, we could say that the company threw that person under the bus. Number 2, a politician publicly criticizes a member of their own party for a policy decision that they themselves had a hand in making. Have a hand in making means they contributed to that. So they themselves contributed to a policy decision, but instead of, taking responsibility for that, they throw someone else under the bus. They throw someone, one of their own party members, under the bus. That means they sacrifice them in order to avoid taking responsibility themselves, right? I don't know much about politics, but I'm assuming this is something that happens quite often. Anyway, so number 3, a teacher blames a student for poor performance on a test when, in fact, the teacher did not adequately prepare the class for the material. Okay, so this is a much more simple example that I can relate to. Teacher also is responsible for not preparing the students well enough, but instead of taking that responsibility for themselves, they blame the student for the poor performance. The student is the one who didn't study. The student is the one who was unprepared. And so in that case, we can say the teacher threw the student under the bus. All right, so this is pretty much what I wanted to cover today. But I do want to point out the difference one more time because it may not have been so clear for some of you. So this expression and this idiom, very similar, but the difference is the expression doing something at the expense of others is focused on benefiting through someone else's sacrifice, okay? Profiting through someone else's sacrifice, okay? I don't know if there's a similar expression in Korean. 누구를 팔다? Does that work? I'm not really sure. You tell me. But the second one, the idiom, throw someone under the bus, is usually to avoid some kind of danger themselves, to avoid, as I said, avoid being held responsible, to avoid some kind of punishment, to avoid being blamed and criticized. And in order to do that, they betray someone else and they sacrifice another person. Not necessarily to gain benefit. Sometimes that is the case, though. But not necessarily that, but it's more focused on avoiding some kind of trouble themselves by sacrificing someone else. That is throwing someone under the bus. Okay? Yeah. Anyway, so that's the difference. Oh, I just thought of an example for the first one, the expression. Doing something at the expense of others. I don't know if you have seen those YouTube channels, but I've seen a few YouTube channels that are dedicated to covering stories about certain celebrities, or it could be even some other YouTubers, and uncovering their dark histories. I don't know if you've seen YouTube channels like this, but there are a few. I've seen a few channels that are really dedicated to that. They're dedicated to uncovering the dark pasts. Even if it has no relevance to now. I mean, nobody really cares about it. It doesn't really matter anymore. But they just show it. They just show, oh, look at this person and look at this dark history they had. Now, there are some cases, of course, where a person's past or history can tell us a lot about the character of that person as a whole. Which can ultimately affect our decision to whether or not support that person now. But like I said, there is some content out there that I've seen where it's just for entertainment purposes. Because as one famous villain once said in a movie, I think, I don't know exactly how it was phrased, but something that people love more than a hero is to watch a hero fall or something like that. I don't know. And but I can certainly understand the psychology that's behind that. And so I think that's one of the reasons that a lot of people enjoy content like that. But anyway, so just think about that. A content creator, like on YouTube, who is dedicated to uncovering these, dark histories and pasts of certain people. I think this is not all cases, but there are those who are profiting in this way. There are those who are benefiting at the expense of others by uncovering their dark histories and pasts. And even though it has no relevance to now, it will create small and big shifts in people's minds about that person, right? So they're doing it at the expense of other people. Okay, so I hope that gives you an idea of what this expression means and what this idiom means and how they're used and what the differences are, okay? But most importantly, what I want to remind you is that the most important thing that happened right now is that you spent the last, 10 minutes or so, I don't know how long this video is going to be, listening to this. Listening to English, allowing your ears to listen to English, allowing your brain to process this in English, think about what it means, to try to understand it, to pick up things that you might be able to learn. That was the most important thing. So in the comment section below, I would like you to share any vocabulary. It doesn't have to be a lot, just any vocabulary, any sentence, any phrase, any expression, just anything that you thought was interesting, something that sticks with you. You could use it as a personal note that you can come back and look at later. By doing that, you are contributing a lot to the learning experience of other people as well, because other people will look at that and say, oh, so these are the things that maybe I should look into a little more carefully, right? Something that I should maybe pay attention to more carefully, right? All right. So I think we can all create a better learning experience by contributing like that, all right? Anyway, so that's pretty much all I wanted to talk about today. I hope you enjoy the rest of your day. And if I don't see you during the weekend, I hope you enjoy the rest of your weekend. I hope I can see you real soon in the next video.